Welcome, wayward souls, to echoes from the loam. They were born of ash and omen, bloodline bound to Salem's flame, summoned to a cottage veiled in bramble and bone. The hearth burns with an older hatred, one who hunted their kin. So make your circle, join your hands, and speak their names aloud. The house stood at the edge of the sea, its foundations sunk into salt-bitten stone, its windows blind with dust. Locals called it Black Salt House, though no one could recall who had named it or when. It had once been a boarding house for widows of the wailing dead, then a sanatorium, and then nothing. And now it waited. 4 women arrived just after dusk, each drawn by bloodlines they had not chosen. Rowan Ashcroft stepped first, her boots crunching on a scatter of iron filings. She was a genealogist by trade, precise and sceptical, descended from Mary Easty, hanged in Salem for the crime of dignity. Myra Bell followed, her breath shallow, her palms bandaged. She had traced her lineage to Bridget Bishop, the first to burn. Talia Crane came next, a podcaster who spoke of folklore like it was scripture. Her ancestor had been Sarah Good, defiant and destitute. Last came June Hollow, quiet as snowfall, carrying a candle that would not light. She bore the name of Susanna Martin, who laughed at her accusers and was silenced for it. The man who greeted them called himself Elias Cotton. He wore a wool coat too heavy for the season and a ring of black on his finger. He claimed to be of descent from Reverend George Burroughs, the minister hanged for witchcraft despite his prayers. But his name was a lie. Born Elias Parris, his blood belonged to Samuel Parris, the reverend who contributed to the deaths of many women in Salem. Inside, the house seemed to breathe. Wallpaper peeled like old skin. A portrait of Cotton Mather hung crooked above the stairwell, his eyes smeared with mildew. The air smelled of brine and burnt rosemary, and bells hung from the rafters, silent and rusted. A mirror in the hallway had been covered with black cloth pinned at the corners with bone. Elias offered wine and warmth. He spoke of healing, of ancestral reckoning, of ritual closure. But his smile was too still. His gaze lingered a little too long. He did not touch iron doorknobs, and he did not enter the hall with the mirror. Each woman had received a gift and an invitation to this closure. Rowan was handed a vial of ash, sealed with wax. Myra received a journal, its pages salt-stained and brittle. Talia was given a shard of a mirror, wrapped in a linen cloth. And June was offered a candle that would not burn, no matter how much she tried. Rowan's room was cold as she headed to bed for the night. Not from weather, though, from something older, the kind of atmosphere that settles into the lungs. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, a cold sweat on her brow, listening to the sea gnaw at the rocks below. The wallpaper above her bed was stained with salt, and the pattern had faded into something that looked like smoke. She had not dreamed that night, not exactly. She had drowned. In her dream, she stood in a wooden tub, wrists bound, mouth gagged. Water poured over her head again and again until her breath became like fire. She saw faces, hooded, pale, unmoved, and a woman screamed her name, but not Rowan. She called her Mary. And when she woke, her throat burned. She sat up slowly, and the candle on the bedside table had melted into a pool of wax, though she hadn't been the one to light it. Rowan touched her chest. Her breath came in short bursts, each one hot enough to sting. She stood and crossed the room. The floorboards groaned beneath her feet. In the hallway, the mirror was still covered, but the cloth had shifted. She reached out, pulling it off, and beneath the cloth, her reflection. And behind her, the iron nails in the doorframe began to rust. Myra stood at the sink, staring at her hands. The kettle screamed behind her on the stove. Her palms were bright red. Not flushed though, not irritated, but bleeding. Thin lines like thread ran from the base of each finger to the wrist. The blood was bright, almost ceremonial, and it didn't drip. It traced. She turned off the kettle, and the silence was almost worse. Behind her, the radio crackled to life. The static. And then a voice. She struck me with her eyes. I felt the blow. I saw the mark. Myra froze. The voice was female, trembling. She wore red. She danced with the devil. She burned my child. Myra stepped back and her heel caught on the rug, falling onto the hard floor. The radio hissed. Bridget Bishop, you are accused of witchcraft. How do you plead? Myra's hands throbbed, and the blood had begun to pool. She crawled toward the radio when the voice changed. I am innocent, and I know nothing of it. The static seemed to swallow the words. Myra reached out, her fingers touched the dial, but the metal burned. She screamed, and somewhere upstairs, Rowan whispered. She begged for mercy, and they gave her fire. Talia had not meant to go into the attic. She had followed the sound of bells, and the attic door opened without any resistance. The air was thick with dust, but it smelled of soil, fresh, damp, turned. And in the centre of the room sat a mourning cloth, black linen folded into the shape of a woman's dress. Talia knelt beside it. Feeling something in her pocket, she reached in and pulled out a blindfold. Had no memory of where it came from. Instinctively, she tied it around her eyes, and the silence deepened. Beneath her knees, the floors grew soft. She was no longer in the attic. She was kneeling in a field. The soil was warm, and a bell was hung from her neck. Around her, women sat in a circle, blindfolded, breathing in unison. One of them leaned forward and whispered. She buried the child with iron nails in its mouth to keep it silent. Talia gasped. The soil beneath her pulsed and a voice rose from it. You are not the first to mourn. You are not the last. Talia tore off the blindfold, but she was alone. The mourning cloth was gone, and her knees were stained with soil, and the bell around her neck had started to ring. Talia sat in the library's farthest corner, where the salt air couldn't reach. The cracked mirror shard lay in her lap, cold as bone. A red thread had appeared on her wrist that morning, thin and winding, and she hadn't spoken since the attic. She thought of Sarah Good, not of the trial, not of the rope, but of the child. Dorcas, aged 4, imprisoned for months. Talia had read the court records. The child confessed. She said her mother had made her do it. Talia had always told herself it was fear, but now she wondered if memory itself was kind of possession. The mirror pulsed faintly. Upstairs, June lit the candle Elias had given her. It burned this time, but the flame was blue. She sat on the edge of the bed, eyes wide, breath shallow. The room grew darker, though the sun had not yet set. The candle hissed and the walls began to whisper. Susanna Martin, you are accused of witchcraft. How do you plead? June's mouth moved, but the voice was not hers. I have no hand in it. I am innocent. The whispers grew louder. She laughed, she mocked, she did not fear the rope. June stood. The candle flickered and the room became a courtroom. The wallpaper peeled into faces. The floorboards groaned like benches, and a judge's voice rang out. Her mirth is unnatural, her silence is defiance. She shall hang. June screamed, but no sound came out. The candle went out on its own, extinguished by an invisible breath. And in the hallway, Talia whispered, we are not cursed. We are remembered. Elias stood in the cellar, sleeves rolled, hands coated in salt. He had drawn a circle. Salt, but blackened with soot, mixed with soil from the graveyard behind the church. And in the centre, he placed 3 objects. A blindfold, a bell, and a page torn from the court ledger, dated July 19th, 1692. He whispered names, Sarah Good, Susanna Martin. Upstairs, Talia and June sat cross-legged on the floor. Neither had spoken since their visions, and June broke first. She laughed, she said, in the courtroom. They called it unnatural, but it wasn't. It was defiance. Talia nodded slowly. Mine was a child. 4 years old, she confessed. They said she had pointed at her mother and cried. June reached out and touched the red thread on Talia's wrist. It's spreading. Talia turned her palm upward. The thread had begun to wind around her fingers now. I think it's some kind of warning. June leaned in closer. I think Elias is planning something. I saw it in the mirror. He's not trying to protect us. Talia didn't flinch, but replied, he's trying to finish it. And below them, the bell rang once. No one had touched it. And the salt circle began to hum. Elias Hollow knelt within the salt circle. The blindfold lay across his knees. He lit 4 candles, one for each woman, each surviving descendant. He spoke their names slowly, reverently, as if each syllable were a key. Bridget Bishop, Sarah Good, Susanna Martin, Mary Easty. With each name, the flame flickered, and with each name, the soil darkened. Elias placed the blindfold over his own eyes. Let them see through me. Let them speak. Upstairs, Talia's thread had reached her elbow. June's candle burned blue. The other girls had now gathered, silent and pale. None had spoken of their visions until now. One had seen a rope, another a courtroom, another a child crying behind iron bars. Talia stood. He's not summoning them, she said. He's offering us. We need to rewrite the ritual. Hurriedly, they gathered salt and candles and laid out a circle. They stitched a new blindfold, this time with white thread. They placed a bell in the center and they wrote their names on paper and burned them. We are not the condemned. We are the witnesses. Below them, Elias began to chant. The house groaned and the soil beneath the salt began to breathe. Elias stood in the center of the salt circle, blindfolded, arms raised. Samuel Paris, blood of my blood. The candles flared. Speak through me and finish what you began. Upstairs, the girls stood in silence. Talia spoke first. Sarah Good, I call you not to suffer but to shield. June followed. Susanna Martin, I call you not to mock but to guide. One by one the girls spoke. Mary Easty, I call you not to plead, to endure. Bridget Bishop, I call you not to burn but to defy. The attic grew colder, the candle burned brighter, and the salt began to hum. Below, Elias screamed, "He is here. He is speaking." But the voice that answered was Sarah's. You are no judge. You are no blood. You are a boy playing games. Elias staggered backwards and the salt circle cracked. Upstairs, the girls placed the blindfold over the bell. We do not ring. We do not accuse. We remember. Elias stood in the broken salt circle, blindfold torn. Samuel Paris, speak through me. Finish it. But the soil beneath him had turned to ash, and the air smelled of smoke. Upstairs, the girls spoke not in whispers or hushed tones, but in voices clear and steady. Sarah Good, Susanna Martin, Rebecca Nurse, Bridget Bishop, Mary Easty, Dorcas Good, Martha Carrier, Elizabeth Howe, Anne Puditer, Alice Parker, Margaret Scott, Sarah Wilds, Wilmot Red, and Martha Corrie. The candle flames flared. Those who died in silence. She opened the ledger. Elizabeth Clark, Anne West, Rebecca West, Mary Green, Joan Cunny, Rose Cullender, Amy Denny, Alice Driver, Mary Lakeland, Margaret Reed, and Catherine Branch. The names filled the attic like smoke. The salt circle ignited. Elias screamed, but the fire did not burn like flame. It burned like memory, like rope, like courtroom dust. The girls did not move. They watched as Elias was consumed, not by the witches, but by the weight of what he had tried to do, tried to summon. The bell rang once, and the house exhaled. The fire had not touched the walls, but something had burned. Elias was gone, not buried, not mourned. The salt circle in the cellar had collapsed. The blindfold lay folded beside it, stitched with thread. The bell was silent. Upstairs, the girls gathered in the attic, the candles still burning. Talia scattered soil across it, taken from the graveyard behind the chapel, mixed with ash from the fire. Myra laid down a cracked mirror shard, and June placed the journal in the centre. Rowan whispered the names, not to summon, to release. Sarah Good, Susanna Martin, Bridget Bishop, Mary Easty. She continued on and on. The air grew warmer. The red on their palms faded. The candle flickered once, and the house exhaled again. The girls stood in silence, and then June spoke. We protect this place now. Not as witches, not as victims, as witnesses. The girls stepped forward and placed their hands on the floor. Let no one forget. They hung the new blindfold above the mirror, and beneath it they placed the bell. Not to ring, to remember. We name you, not to bind you, but to break the rope. We call you not to summon, but to set you free. Ash to ash, salt to soil, thread to breath. You were silenced, you were burned, you were buried. But we remember, we speak, we stand. Sarah, Susanna, Mary, Bridget, mothers of fire, daughters of silence. Let no judge rise, let no rope tighten, let no name fade. We are not cursed. We are not condemned. We are the witnesses. We are the descendants from fire, and the bell shall not ring again. And there the tale ends for now, but the echoes will always remain. If you've enjoyed your stay here in my domain, leave your mark, a review, a whisper, a 5-star sigil. Until next time, wanderers, I've been Fauna Blakewell, and you've been changed forever.